Imam Dr. Usama Hasan from Quilliam, a counter-extremism organisation. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, what do you make of this attack?
Sadly, it's not a surprise. The terrorists, and we think it's probably ISIS or Al-Qaeda inspired, do carry out a spike of attacks during Ramadan, sadly. It's a Muslim holy month, and of course a time of increased worship, etc., for Muslims. But for the terrorists, sadly, it's a time of increased frenzied attacks. We saw this last year, actually, across Europe. There was a spike in a number of attacks around Ramadan. So it's quite worrying. We're just into the second week of Ramadan now. We've got another 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think we have to be extra vigilant for the next 3 weeks at least, and beyond, of course.
I'm interested because Harun Khan, the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, he mentions Ramadan in a statement that he issued overnight, saying that this should happen in this month of Ramadan when many Muslims are praying and fasting. Only goes to show that these people respect neither life nor faith. How do these extremists square that circle?
Well, because this kind of attack for them is jihad. You see, they've got a completely twisted interpretation of jihad, because terrorism is not jihad. Jihad is ethical warfare and also inner struggle, and war is a last resort. But for them, this is war. And they've declared that openly many times, and therefore for them, Ramadan is a month of patience, etc., is also a time to increase their fervour and fanaticism and to carry out more attacks. And they've been doing this for years, since 9/11. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda would step up their attacks in Ramadan in Afghanistan, for example. But, one of the eyewitnesses last night I was listening to on the television was on his way to the mosque for evening prayers. And he was driving on London Bridge, and he saw the whole incident, basically. So, I mean, that just shows you the paradox and the irony of the whole thing, is that these guys are carrying out murder in the name of religion, whilst the vast majority of innocent, moderate Muslims are actually spending more time in worship, fasting, prayer, charity, and service to others.
And obviously people have sort of talked about it being an ISIS-inspired attack. To what extent do you think, though, some of this is a homegrown problem?
Well, we don't know the identities of these attackers yet, or I certainly haven't seen. So we can't be sure, because over the last few years, obviously, there's been a large number of refugees and asylum seekers coming in, including from Syria and Iraq, from ISIS territories. And we know ISIS do send people to Europe specifically to carry out attacks. But of course, we have seen other attacks recently which were homegrown. I mean, obviously the 7/7 bombers were homegrown. So was the Westminster attacker and the Manchester attacker, although he was partly radicalised overseas. So we certainly have a homegrown problem. I mean, the security services have been telling us for 15 years that there used to be 2,000, now 3,000 people being closely monitored by the security services, and the vast majority of those are homegrown, sadly. So we do have an ongoing problem which we need to be aware of and continue to combat.
And how is it that we're failing as a society in terms of allowing people to get into this kind of mindset where they these are people attacking their own country effectively?
Yes, well, actually, I think the security services generally have been very successful. They've foiled dozens of plots like this in the past. So, overall, the counter-terrorism strategy works.
But rather than, not in terms of the counter-terrorism strategy, I just mean in terms of, is this a problem of not managing to successfully integrate, certain people into society better? Is this about second-generation immigrants who, feel disenfranchised with their country?
Yes, it's partly that. I mean, that's where we're failing as a society, and also to take on extremist ideology. I think a lot of people in society are actually very naive about the threat and are in denial about it, especially around the extremist ideology, which justifies it. So for example, for those of us who work at Quilliam, it's infuriating that a lot of people refuse to accept twisted religious ideology can be a major motivating factor. And by doing that, we continue to give cover and excuses to terrorists, effectively apologizing for them by refusing to to address the vicious beliefs which justify this. Well, so for example, when the recent attacks happened in Manchester, there were people saying, it's to do with petty crime and disenfranchisement. Yeah, but petty criminals don't become suicide bombers like the Manchester guy. These guys were basically suicide attackers, what I call inrimatis, who are prepared to die. So although they're not literally killing themselves, they know there's armed police on the street. They've only got knives. This was a clear example of what they call an attack designed to end up as martyrs in their views, to be killed. And of course, the petty criminals don't generally do that. They try to save their own lives. Yeah. But these guys are suicidal. Basically, they're suicidal attackers, and we have to deal with the extremist messages which are there in a tiny fringe of the Muslim communities and wider societies, actually, because you have far-right terrorists as well on the other side. And we do have to confront those messages of hate and be more inclusive, somehow win them over, somehow move people away from the path of hate to that of love or inclusivity. Because to kill innocent people, you have to hate them, you have to dehumanize them.
Yeah. You say we're being naive about this extremism. In what way are we being naive? Is this extremism on UK soil or abroad?
Well, it's international. I mean, it's right across Europe and America, and it's there in Muslim-majority countries as well. I mean, sadly, attacks like this are almost daily, but certainly weekly occurrences in places like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and other places, Libya, Yemen, and people in those societies are actually used to this kind of thing because they see it in the newspapers every other week. But one thing about naive is too many commentators come on the media, etc., and say, well, this is just petty crime. These are just drug and alcohol-fueled people, and the refusal to deal with the difficult questions about twisted religious ideology. Because, yes, some of them are petty criminals. Some of them are actually people with a very non-Islamic lifestyle, if you like, in terms of alcohol and drugs and this and that. But even there, the terrorists, the extremists, promise them salvation. You see, absolution. That you've been a bad Muslim all your life. You can go out in a blaze of glory. You can be a martyr, and all your mistakes, your un-Islamic lifestyle will be forgiven, and you'll go to heaven. You'll go to paradise immediately. So there is a strong religious, twisted religious ideology which justifies those kinds of attacks, and it is actually Muslims, devout Muslims themselves, who are religious in the right sense, if you know what I mean, who are best placed to deal with that religious ideology. And that's an acknowledgement which we need more of, and we need more courage from all sectors of society, including Muslim leaders. It's not the fault of Muslims in general, but we do have a specific problem which we do have to just openly acknowledge and then confront.
Finally, very quickly, how worried are you? How difficult is it to be a Muslim right now? How worried about a backlash are you?
Well, sadly, there's always a danger of a backlash. I mean, after the Manchester attack, there was an immediate arson attack on Older Mosque. And in Ramadan, the mosque are especially